Hi, and welcome to Dip In and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I will, first of all, say apologies for the voice, but as it is DA Awareness Month, lots and lots of talking going on. So I'm very, very fortunate today to be sitting down with Dr. Nadine Macaluso. Many people will know Dr. Nadine from her work, but for those who don't, she's a psychotherapist and expert in narcissistic abuse, trauma bonding, and she's the author of Run Like Hell. So from the UK, good afternoon, Dr. Nadine.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited for
Oh,
our conversation.
oh, thank you. Well, if you wouldn't mind explaining to people, and one thing I haven't mentioned there is actually, because to me it's part of obviously your story, is that
Yes,
you
of course.
are the real life ex-wife of the Wolf of Wall Street.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct. Yes,
yeah,
I am. Yeah, that's how my journey began, right? At
yeah,
22 years old, I met him and entered into the, unbeknownst to me, the quintessential trauma bond.
yeah, yeah. And if you wouldn't mind explaining, because I know many people who listen to the podcast do understand a lot around domestic abuse, but there are always new listeners who don't always know the nuances. So, in terms of
Sure.
trauma bonding, would you be happy to explain a little bit more about what it is, how it all begins?
Yeah, sure. So a trauma bond is a toxic, dysfunctional relationship between two emotionally attached people. Right. You're not going to have it with your barrister at Starbucks, right? You have to
Yeah,
be emotionally attached to the person. And what makes it toxic and dysfunctional is that one of the partners wants power and control over their lover,
yeah, yeah.
right? And so that's not the way love should be,
No,
clearly. But
no.
that's that's what happens is one of the partners wants to control their partner. And so for a trauma bond to exist, there has to be two conditions. There has to be a power imbalance. And what does that mean, right? So one of the partners has power over the other one.
Yeah,
And and how do they get that power? Simply because you love somebody, right? They can
yeah,
influence you. Also, if they have more resources on you, more than you, but that you depend on those resources, right? It's not just that they have more resources, but it's that you depend on them. Or as I experienced, my ex was very dominating, intimidating, and threatening towards me. So he had power over me because I feared him. So
yeah,
that's the first condition, right? So the partner wants power and control. There has to be a power imbalance. And what happens in the relationship, there's a behavioral pattern called intermittent reinforcement.
yeah.
And that's
Okay.
a long, crazy word, two words. What does it mean, right? It means that 70% of the time, the partner is cruel, controlling, abusive, and betraying. And 20% or 30% of the time, the partner is kind, generous, and nice.
Yeah,
And so it's those extreme experiences of kindness and cruelty that actually create extreme feelings
yeah.
inside of us that actually create the bond.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's a brilliant way of explaining it is that intermittent, I think for a lot of
Yeah,
people, the misconception is it's always abusive, it's
that's right.
always negative. And actually, that's not the case at all. Very, very often, it is the love and from the victim's perspective, the love, the compassion, the
Yes,
understanding. And from the perpetrator's perspective, it's I'm just going to keep you in this cycle and I'll apologize in a certain way occasionally. It may be, well, you drove me to it, etc.
right.
Which is their idea of apologizing. But it is that
Correct.
intermittent. And I think that's why it's so hard when somebody leaves and I always say, it's never that straightforward. Not everybody can leave. There's lots of various reasons why somebody can't. If it's like you say about the dependency, it could be financial, etc. Um, but actually, if somebody can leave the relationship and is able to, how do you then unpick all that? Because that's what's become your normal. That to you is a
That's
normal
right.
relationship, isn't it? So when
That's right.
society judges and says, well, why didn't you just leave? But why would you assume somebody could? And that's what
Right.
I always think. Yeah,
Yeah. And also, women don't leave. We know it's the most dangerous time is when a
yeah,
woman leaves, right? They don't leave because of fear. They don't leave because of dependency, financial dependency. Maybe they have children. Um, there's a lot of reasons. And the abuser is not abusive all the time. So what happens is that time when I say they show up as Romeo or Dirty John. So when they
yeah,
show up as Romeo, that's hope. Hope is the hook. So
Mm.
you're like, oh, there he is. Oh, okay. He's really not that bad. And then also they do blame you for everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And they often say they're going to change. They offer promises to change. So it's very complex dynamic.
Yeah, it is hugely so. And I love what you just said then. It's something I always come back to is that hope element. And I think for those who have experienced abuse and are hopefully coming out the other side, hope is everything, isn't it? Hope that you can have a healthy relationship on your terms when you're ready. It doesn't have to be as soon as you leave one relationship and enter into another.
Right.
I often say to people, take that time for you because this is your time. Work out what your boundaries are. And if somebody isn't willing to acknowledge those or respect those, then they're not the person for you. Because if they do
That's
respect
right.
you, then, it's don't tell me, show me, as my dad would
Right.
say.
That's right. That's right. I always say I'm not in the tell me phase. I'm in the show me phase.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's so important that a few years ago, talking like this just wouldn't have
Yeah.
happened. It was
No.
so taboo to talk about abuse. No, no, no. And I think again, it comes back to that societal, but it doesn't impact me. But I always say to people, how do you know? Because if you think that's your normal, and let's unpick what isn't normal in a relationship, and then you see
Right.
people that light bulb moment go, oh my God, that isn't normal. It's
No,
frightening.
that
Yeah,
isn't normal. Yeah.
yeah. And I think, so tell us a little bit more about your book as well, your fabulous book.
Yeah, so I wrote a book, got published in 2024 called Run Like Hell.
Love
And
that
what
title.
happened was that I had a private practice in Los Angeles and I really didn't want to have a specialty. This wasn't like this was going to be my specialty. Now you'd think it would have been obvious based upon my past, but
Yeah,
but it wasn't. And so what happened, all these smart, bright, beautiful, kind, empathetic women were coming into my practice experiencing coercive control, right?
yeah,
Which is an invisible form of abuse where the partner is intimidating, dominating, threatening, isolating, pressuring you to have sex, pressuring you around money, right?
yeah,
And we used to think of violence as a physical, like domestic violence as a physical incident model,
yeah,
single physical incident, but coercive control is a huge piece of it.
yeah.
So I saw all these women experiencing coercive control, betrayal, abuse, and I said, what's happening? Are we in the 1950s? And that's when I went back to the research, being a true academic, and understood about coercive control, trauma bonds, dark tetrad, intermittent reinforcement. And I wanted to learn about all these things. And so I packaged it into a book where in the first section, I talk about what a trauma bond is, the pathological predatory partner, who's the victim. And then the middle section, I talk about the symptoms,
Mm.
why do women leave, and how to leave safely. And then the third section is how to heal.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And that's the part that many victims forget about. You need
That's
that
right.
time to heal. And it looks
That's
different for everybody, doesn't it? It's very much on your terms, your time. I always say that to people I worked for my local charity, my local domestic abuse charity a few years ago, and not everybody's ready at the same time. We can't
that's
rush that, can we? It's very much, some people might say, I'll come for support. Actually, do you know what? It's too soon. And then they may come back a year later, maybe six
that's right.
months. But it has to be. And I think, unfortunately, the world wants to believe there's some kind of magic pill and we'll all be fine and just, get on with it now. You've left. Surely your life's better
Oh,
now.
there's a lot
Yeah,
of healing. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
on average, we know it takes a woman 4 to 7 attempts to leave.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think, along with that again, with that idea around, I always say when people say, why don't they just leave? If somebody does leave, then it turns into the post-separation abuse of, well, you've left now,
That's
everything should be okay. But again, and
Oh, yes.
I don't know what it's like in the US, but over here, there's a real, unfortunately, strong sense of victim blaming. Every
Oh,
media,
that's the whole reason I wrote my book. You
the
have
whole,
learned
yeah,
helplessness, you're codependent, you're a love addict.
yeah,
And and it's like, no, I was not responsible for my ex's drug addiction and rage and
yes,
need to
yeah,
control it.
exactly. Yeah,
I was not responsible for that. And
no.
to make the victim responsible for that, and the victim goes into this relationship just wanting to love.
That's all it is. And it's so the beauty of what you talk about and how you talk about it is that simple. It's such a
Mhm.
complex subject, but yet the simplicity of it is we all want to be loved. We're human beings, and I often, say I do an article column for a magazine over here, and I talk about, it's the human aspect. We're all human beings. You can call someone a victim, you can call them a survivor, but they're just labels. Essentially, they're a
Right.
human being who have every right to be loved. And okay, they pick somebody to love who didn't love them back because they don't know how to love,
That's
and
right.
that's the difficulty. So it's, I'm really passionate about changing that narrative around that victim blaming. And you only have to
Very
look at them. Yeah, yeah, you have to look at the media and how they portray stories. And well, don't you think that they should have known? Known what? What were they supposed
and
to
right.
know?
And
Yeah,
and this predatory pathological person presents charming.
yeah, oh
They everything usually you want,
yeah,
right? Or
100%.
you think that you want. And so they wear a mask in the beginning. They
Yeah,
don't come in cursing you out and being controlling. They come in charming,
yeah,
magnanimous. You're my soulmate. What can I do for you? They're
yeah,
generous, they're kind, they're helpful. They
yeah.
can feign empathy. Then over time, the mask falls and they become Dirty John.
Yeah, they do exactly, and it's that. I did an episode a while ago with my old boss from the charity. We talked about it's that drip drip effect. If people could understand that very slow dripping of a tap, and it goes on and on and on, and it builds. But
Right.
when you get to that point where it's built to such an extent, you're in that trauma bond. You're there.
Yeah. And if you think about coercive control, it's invisible to the other
Yeah,
world, right? To the outside world, what I named, right? Threatening, domination,
yeah,
isolation, intimidating, micromanagement, constant surveillance or demeaning you or undermining you. Those behaviors are invisible to the outside world. So we call them
yeah,
invisible chains. And so the victim also starts to feel crazy because she's like, is this really abuse? Am I
yeah,
really being but I know
yeah.
it doesn't feel right. I know for me, when I was in my trauma bond and nobody was talking about any of this. So
No,
I,
no,
I mean, I was so in the woods with this. But inside, I was just like, something's not right.
yeah,
This
yeah,
isn't how love is supposed to be. I know it's not supposed to be perfect.
no.
This is not what I signed up for.
That should be put on a t-shirt.
Yes.
I did not sign up for this. And I think, again, you just hit the nail on the head there. It's so important for people to understand that process of it. And they are very charming. Charming is disarming. We know all these, and usually they're somebody who is in a position of power and authority within their workplace. People are
Yes.
shocked when I'll say, well, a judge can be an abuser, a teacher
Oh,
can be an abuser.
150%. Yeah. Well, if you think about it, the people that are abusers, most of them are obsessed with power and control. So
Mm,
look at all the careers where you have power and control. A judge
absolutely.
is which one? Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's so many of them, pastors, priests.
Yeah. Hiding
Um,
behind that mask.
and not to say
Mm.
that they're all, of course not. We're not
No,
general at
no.
all. But these
It's different.
people want power and control, and they're
Yeah.
drawn to positions of power.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what makes it so difficult because I think, again, we need to step away from the idea that a victim looks a certain way or is from a certain
Right.
demographic or,
That's right.
and that has to change because it can happen to anybody. And when I
Anybody.
started doing kind of the consultancy and I named my website You Don't Own Me after the Leslie Gore song because it's a bloody
Yes.
brilliant song.
Great song.
But nobody should own anybody else, and it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
what I say about that is that when you think about healthy love, what is the components? Okay, the first component is, trust and tenderness and loyalty and empathy and respect, right?
yeah,
But there's a second piece to love that we don't talk about, and that's giving somebody the space to be who they are.
yeah, yes,
And in a
yes.
trauma bond, doesn't occur. In a toxic
No,
relationship, that doesn't occur. You have to be who they want you to be. You can't have your own needs. You can't have your own emotions.
yeah,
And that you can't really be different than them.
No.
it's they can't tolerate this term of it's called differentiation, where
Mm,
we're in relationships where we should be differentiated. We should be able to have our own autonomy and have
yeah.
agency. And
Yeah.
in this relationship, you actually get punished for autonomy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think you hear so many victims talk about it. It's like walking on eggshells because you daren't step outside that line of disagreeing with something or having an opinion. And it becomes over time easier in some ways to say, look, I'll just agree because that is going to stop the next argument. Or, you can
That's right.
sense when it's building. Yeah. And I
That's
think
right.
and you've just said something there that I love as well. And it is like how I think all of us struggle at some point in our lives to know who we are. If we're going to sort of that existential, who are we? Why are we here?
Yes.
But somebody that's come
Yeah.
out of an abusive relationship, they're trying to find out who they were before they met that person,
Yes.
maybe unpick that, who they were when they were with the person and who they are now. And I think a lot of the time I try and talk about it as like moving forward because, very often when I've talked to people about recovery, they'll say, well, I don't feel like I've had a cold, and I feel that that's how that explains it. Whereas moving forward is we take steps back. We know that when you come out of an abusive relationship, there's going to be days where you don't feel like you've made any progress, and that's fine. You're allowed those days, but
That's
also you can have the days where you feel like you're on top of the world.
That's right. That's right. Because healing isn't linear, but healing is possible. And what happens is, when I'm sitting with women, of course, when they choose to leave is their choice alone,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I don't pressure anybody. This is a big decision. But when they do, so let's say they come to me and they say, I want to leave. I say, okay, if you've made this real internal decision that you have radical acceptance, you're in a trauma bond, you want to leave, but you're in the relationship still, you now have to wear the mask.
yeah,
You cannot let them see you coming. You have to now plan behind the scenes, right? Get your own credit card, get your own bank account, make sure you understand what the documents are, get some trauma informed help, right? Go to a domestic violence advocate, right? Somebody like yourself. I have an online community called Surthriver for $30 a month where women can join and get support and get support groups and education, right? So, but don't ever let them know that you want to leave. You have to
no,
prepare behind the scenes and then make your exit.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Very
safety.
important.
That's
Safety is first.
yeah.
Don't, if they all of a sudden say, no, no, you know what? I had a woman in one of my community, right? Like, well, my ex is like, no, we don't need to go to attorneys. Let's just do this amicably. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. You can agree to his face about that, but you better get an attorney on the
But
side
yes,
that's guiding you.
yeah,
Because things with these people, when you leave, listen, let's think about it this way. If they wanted to have power and control over you, and now you're saying goodbye,
yeah,
how happy do you think they're going to be?
yeah, yeah. They're not going to take it well at
They're not
all.
going to do well.
No, that is so, so true. I love that. And it's important. I think so many people don't think that there's support out there. And I think knowing that you can make those plans, and I think something else you said before that's so true is it's that gut instinct.
Yeah,
I've said to people in the past, especially those with children, with a perpetrator, if you are planning on leaving, if you are maybe looking at what your next step is. If it's things like the children's passports, hand them to somebody you trust, maybe your parents, maybe
that's
somebody
right.
outside of the situation, because you don't know what that person's capable of. So if you go with your gut and say, documents that I need, maybe a marriage certificate so I can file for divorce, whatever. I've known people, perpetrators hide the marriage
Oh,
certificate.
sure.
So you can't, it makes it more difficult to divorce them. Take the
Oh, yeah,
passports, flee the country.
they'll do anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll do anything. Yeah,
So
so
that's,
you
yeah.
have to be so prepared.
Yeah.
Just helped a woman leave after 33 years.
Oh, amazing.
And because she did it right, where she worked with me, she did all the work, all the documentation for 6 months behind the scenes. She
Wow.
got a great attorney. We got a temporary restraining order, got him removed from the house, got guns removed from the house. She's in the house. Now, it's still hard because divorced after all these times. Not that she wants to be with him, but she's dealing with kids and things. But now he's on his ass,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to start with these people on the defense. You don't want
Yeah.
them on the offense, and that's why you have to be super prepared. Because then, when you're done out, right, and you're managing the divorce or you're managing, now comes the deep work of healing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And you can do that much better from a place of strength. Like
Yes.
you say, instead of trying to, I've often said when people are, especially over here in the UK, if you're dealing with social services, the police, the family
Oh, yeah,
courts, you've got 50,000 places, you're trying to work, you're trying to, you've got children to take care of. And in all
that's
of
right.
that, whenever I talk to organisations, I'll always say to the staff, but you have to take time for you. It is that put your own oxygen mask on. You're not being
Yes,
selfish. You're not being,
right.
up your own bum and thinking you're wonderful. Actually, you're doing the right thing so you then can tackle whatever's coming next.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think it's so difficult with, post separation abuse over here is only really just starting to be understood now. And
Mm.
it's an area I'm massively passionate about because, again, people don't believe that once you've left, it can go on for 10, 15, 20 years and sometimes for the rest
Oh,
of people's
yeah.
lives. And knowing that you do that from a place where you've taken time and have days where you say, enough's enough, I can't. Today wasn't a great day, but you know what? I'll try again tomorrow. That's absolutely fine. You have to do
That's
what's
right.
right for
That's
you.
right. That's right. That's right. And you know what? That's whenever the women are like, oh, Dr. Nay, I made a mistake. I screwed up. I did this. I'm like, you know what? Tomorrow's another day. You
Exactly.
have another chance.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And a chance you wouldn't have had if you'd have stayed. And that,
Definitely not.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yesterday I was working with somebody and I said, I've never had a woman who's left say to me, I'm so sad I've left.
No, no, no.
Have
That
you
is
ever?
so,
Have you?
no, no, no. They're like
Right?
a new person.
Right?
Yeah,
My bag. No, I've never ever had a woman say that to me.
that's so true.
So it's like, don't, you have to think about that. But I have had plenty of women say, I'm so sad I stayed.
Yeah. And do you know what? That's so true because that's one of the saddest things I think for a lot of people is they feel like they've wasted so many years. And what I always try and say about that is, well, look at it this way, look at the children you have.
That's
Okay, the
right.
relationship
That's right.
wasn't what you wanted, what you needed, but
Yes.
it happened and you have beautiful children out of it. You're stronger. And so many people who've been through abuse end up working in this area because they know the importance of
That's
if you just help one other person, you wish you could have had that when you were in that situation.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
and then it
That's right. Right. That's
snowballs.
right.
Yeah.
That's why I do social media. That's why I wrote my book. That's why I have my community because therapy is expensive, right? And so I really
Yeah.
wanted to democratize what I do. And so we run 4 support groups a week. I bring in an expert every week to talk. I teach my book as a course
Wow.
once a week, and it's for $30
I
because
mean,
I know
you know,
there's so much financial coercion and financial abuse
yeah.
and you need support while you're going through this. And I always say a trauma bond to break it is really hard. So
Mm,
that's why meditations and journal prompts and assessments and community. And it takes like you have to attack it.
yeah.
Because even if you leave, a major symptom of a trauma bond, even after you leave, is that you still long for your abuser, even though you know that he's bad for you.
And that
And
doesn't
people
get talked about. That does not get talked
know.
about enough.
And
No.
it's actually an atypical symptom of a trauma bond is that you've left, you're like, thank God I left. But then because there's kind of like a biochemical addiction from the intermittent reinforcements, the extreme dopamine and the extreme stress and adrenaline, that you crave them, and that's
Mm.
normal. But
Yes.
then get shamed again. So anybody listening to this, it's like, no, that's normal. That's where you have to have an accountability partner. That's
Yeah.
where you have to have a support group. That's where you have to really work on no contact and keeping them blocked because you will have times where you long for the abuser. And
Mm.
that's scary because then you get afraid of relapse. But I'm here to tell you it's normal. Just don't give into it.
Oh, I love that. And again, it really doesn't get talked about enough. It doesn't. It's so, so important that
So
whole
important.
idea. And because I think people are ashamed to say, I actually miss my abuser, or I miss the
Yes.
idea of the situation I was in. I thought,
Right. Yeah, or you miss, or you're grieving the illusion of what you thought it could be.
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, a lot of people think, but I invested 20, 30, 40 years. It can't all have been for nothing. But I think when that mindset shifts, and like you just said, you have the right community around you, you have the right people around you, you start to see that those years behind you aren't your best years. They're the ones
Right.
that are staring you ahead of you, going, you know what, these are the best years of your life. This
That's
is
right.
where you're going to flourish and shine and do amazing
That's right.
things that you
That's
couldn't
right.
have done if you were in that relationship any longer. Yeah.
Correct.
It's so,
Correct.
oh, I love that because I do think it's something that doesn't, and I think people who are listening, and I get lovely comments from people saying, I love the way it's just the way you talk with people and the way that people come on and discuss things in a way that is so normal. Because, like you say, you go and see a therapist. Some of us will put walls up. We won't tell them everything. We're not quite sure. You've got to build that rapport. Whereas something
Of
like this,
course.
where it could be 2 o'clock in the morning, you're lying in bed going, I'm really having a panic attack here. I'm worrying, I'm stressing, I'm overthinking. Did I do the right thing? And listening to something where somebody's voice, as lovely as yours, is saying, I'm here to tell you it's normal. That's what
Yeah.
people need. Massively
It's
so. Yeah.
Yeah, and people and then the real work is, when you leave the trauma bond, because we've been so obsessed with the pathological partner, now the time is turn the mirror back on you. Who are
Yeah.
you? What
Yes.
do you what are your attachment patterns? What are your personality traits? How did your developmental trauma wire you, right?
Yeah.
And it's really can be trauma bonds, I always say, crack us open, and the brain and body are willing to grow from threat because it's so painful, right? So we're like more open to change.
Yeah.
And so when we're open to, when we're cracked open because of the pain, we're like, it's a good time to start to do the real deep work of personal growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that. It's exactly that. And I think, in terms of growth, unfortunately, again, it comes back to how society and how the media view things and in films and all the rest of it. It's, growth has to be this thing that's so perfect, and it's not. It's messy, it's
Oh,
difficult, there's the good, there's the bad, there's the ugly, and all of it. And sometimes it's things we have to admit to ourselves that we don't necessarily want to admit to ourselves, but we
that's
have
right.
to be able
But
to
we have,
then move
but we
forward.
have
And
to. Right.
yeah, and hopefully, for a lot. One thing I was going to say as well, I just thought about then was when I talk to organisations, I try and do like a myth busting around kind of ideas that society has. So, for example, drugs and alcohol, that makes someone abusive. And I'll say, well, no, it doesn't make them abusive. It will exacerbate any situation you're in.
Yeah.
Alcohol, drugs are going to elevate things to a whole other level.
Yeah. But
But
it doesn't
actually,
make it, doesn't
that's
make an
no,
abuse. No,
no, no, that's
it
not
doesn't
what makes
make.
someone abusive.
No, no, I
Yeah.
mean, and there are billions of things that make them an abuser, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what makes them abusive
Yeah.
because, they feel entitled, they feel superior, and usually they lack a moral right? They lack a moral compass,
Oh,
they feel entitled, they feel superior.
yeah.
They usually can have a cluster B personality disorder like antisocial, narcissism, or
Mm,
borderline. They can have a compulsive process disorder such as sex as gambling. They're
yeah.
usually impulsive. They can have substance abuse and they can have a mood disorder.
Yeah.
And they can have sadism. They can have
Yeah.
psychopathy. There's something called the dark tetrad. So they can have, which is psychopathy, Machiavellianism, which means they're highly manipulative,
Yeah.
sadism, narcissism. So, I mean, just look at all the things I just named that they can
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
So how is a basic, a person who's not trained in psychology really supposed to dissect all of that, right? So the
Yeah.
second chapter in my book is called Is He Twisted or Tender, where I really unpack all the different personality traits and compulsive behaviors and impulsive behaviors that this person can have.
Yeah. No, I love that. And like you say, you've just named some off the top of your head. And
Right.
that's why it's so complex and it's not
That's right.
straightforward. And very often to the outside world, I'm going to quote my mom now, is the street angel, house devil. to the
Right.
outside world, this kind
Like
of,
that. I never heard of that street
yeah.
angel.
I don't know if I don't know if it's a northern thing from up north in Manchester. I don't know, but I just know my mum has used that over the years, and I love it. And it's just sums them up. It
It
is.
just sums it up. And then some of them are very overt, like my ex-husband. Some of them are covert,
Yeah.
right? They're much more obtuse about it. Their abuse is more low key. They're not
Yes.
as bold and fearless, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they come in all different shapes and forms. But at the end of the day, they're predatory, pathological people.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and I call them pathological because pathological means mentally unwell. And what I say, this person will use, harm, exploit, and betray you and anyone to get their needs met for money, power, pleasure, and status. And to
Yeah.
me, anybody who would do that is mentally unwell.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because to anybody else, they'd just be like, "Why? Why would
Yeah,
Why would you do that?"
right.
And I think another important area is in terms of children. I've realised over here the importance of children getting support when an abusive
Yes.
relationship has been in play. Um, and the difference with children who get support, that emotional intelligence that they learn, it's just phenomenal. It's
Right.
phenomenal.
Yeah, no, because children get trauma bonded to the
Yeah.
predatory partner as well.
Mm. Yeah. And I've said previously, and again, sometimes it's not a very popular opinion when I'm talking to organisations, is that um, a child will love both parents, regardless of whether they're an abuser or not. A child, all they want is love, and all they want to receive is love. So they don't see the perpetrators being anything other than that parent, and it's just, I think it is really important that children have, to a certain extent, obviously, if it's dangerous, then, there can't be
Right.
a relationship. But if there is a possibility of them having a relationship, but fully knowing what that person is, and I've said this to children before when I've worked with children, is you can love that parent, but you don't have to like that behavior. You don't have to accept that behavior. And I think that's something that needs to be kind of, to me, should be taught in schools, from a
Yeah,
very young
yeah,
age right up. But I think
yeah.
for
Well, I
parents,
mean, teaching, especially young girls about all of this, teenagers like about love and
yeah,
all these things that we're talking about, right, is super important because
yeah,
we know the highest statistic is young girls 18 to 24,
yeah,
right? When they
yeah,
first get into it. When I was 22, when I first entered into my trauma bond. That doesn't mean it
yeah.
can't happen at any age. Of course it
No,
can. But that's when they're the most gullible, of course, the most naive. And I do believe that this education really needs to be taught. I mean, hence, why I wrote my book, right?
yeah, yeah,
I
definitely.
believe that education leads to empowerment.
Yeah, yeah. And if we aren't making sure that everybody's educated, then we can't complain when people don't know what it's all about and don't understand it. And I
That's
don't
right.
know if you experience this, but again, I know a lot of victims and survivors feel that their family and friends don't understand, or I
Oh,
do a lot.
yeah,
I talk so much about language. So with family and friends, I will say, just think about the language you're using when you're talking to somebody that's within your group that is either a friend or a family member experiencing abuse. Saying things like, "I could have seen them coming a mile off," is so unhelpful. That doesn't help
that's right.
anyone. All you're doing is
No, no,
reinforcing that victim blame.
because you couldn't have. You couldn't have.
No.
And it's another reason why I started my community is because the woman will be like, okay, this is everybody gets it.
Yeah.
Everybody gets it when I go back to my trauma bond. Nobody judges me.
Yeah.
Everybody gets it when I long for them, or everybody gets it, just when I'm explaining what I went through and because the victim feels so much shame
Yeah.
and the perpetrator blames us for everything anyway, like that's even possible. But they do. So the self-blame and shame that the victim feels already is crippling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So and unfortunately, well-meaning individuals unfortunately add to it.
Yeah, yeah, they do, and this is why I think we're getting into. I mean, over here in the UK, we've just had the announcement of the presumption of contact being removed or repealed. So in law, it had been that both parents had a right to contact with the child, regardless of whether abuse was alleged, etc. And it's going to take a long time to filter down, but it is a massive step in the right direction of saying, actually, just because somebody is biologically related to that child does not mean that they have a right to, because you're not only traumatizing the child, you're traumatizing the victim parent that is trying to move
Yeah.
forward with
So
their
that
life.
law just changed there?
So it just was announced yesterday. It's going to be go through Parliament, but they've announced that they're repealing the presumption of contact.
Oh, that's wonderful
So it's a
news.
definite step in the right direction. And the lady that's been heavily involved campaigning, she's a lovely lady called Claire Throssell. She's an MBE over here. And she's going to come on the podcast. And just again, it's that if we're not saying that every parent is an abuser,
Of
but if children
course.
are being put at risk, and the idea is it's in the children's best interest to have contact with both parents. That's true if both parents are safe parents, you
That's
know.
right. If
Yeah,
safe parents.
yeah,
Yeah. No, it's because listen, there's no, I mean, we know that elderly people and children are the most vulnerable, helpless people,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
so if you can't even stand up to the abuser, how on earth is a child going to? I
yeah, absolutely,
mean,
absolutely.
come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
So
there's the power imbalance, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that fear, living, if you've lived and that learned behavior for maybe your entire life as a child is don't rock the boat, don't cause any problems. And then they grow up into adults who then potentially think, well, this is normal, so that relationship seems normal, and pick kind of future abusive relationships. And that's where I think if society truly understood the absolute scope of this, they would be
Yes,
horrified. Yeah, yeah.
I know. Well, that's why we're having this conversation, aren't we?
I love it. And so what is next for Dr. Nadine? What are you up to next?
So
Lots.
really, what's next for me is just to grow this community. I
Yeah,
started it in February. I didn't really know how amazing it would be. It's called the Surthriver community. And so I just want to grow it because I just want to give support and validation and education to more and more women.
yeah,
And so it keeps me quite busy between my private practice, my social media, and doing podcasts. Tonight I'm actually getting an award, so that's exciting.
oh, well done.
Getting, yeah, I'm getting, it's called the Making a Difference Award.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I'm going to a theater tonight. Colby Calais and Sean Colvin are going to be performing, and I'm getting an award. So that's exciting.
Oh,
And
amazing.
really just keep doing, more of what I'm doing and seeing what emerges and trying to make real change at a grassroots level.
Yeah, and you are definitely making change. And I think what you are doing, and what I love is, when I approached you to say, would you come on the podcast? I'm thinking it's little old me over in the UK, not well known in any way, shape, or form, but doing this to help, and I do get lovely
Yeah,
people saying, I do feel the help. I can see it's making a difference.
yeah,
And
yeah,
professionals using it as a resource to be able to explain
sure.
to their staff. Fantastic. And when you said you come on, I just thought, I don't know, you probably say over there, she's a class act. She's a class act. She's like, come on. I was going, no, no, she's not going to come on. Oh, okay. So I'm so
Yeah,
unbelievably grateful to you because
yeah.
I do
This is
appreciate.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And it's my life's mission, and I just feel like this is how we do it. It's one conversation at a time. And then
Yeah.
if this conversation hits two people,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
tell that this is how we have to do it. And we're all in
Yeah.
this together. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're an absolute gem, and thank you so much for joining me today.
And
Thank you.
I was born in England. I was born in England.
One thing I meant to blooming mention, I was too busy getting involved in our conversation,
Yeah,
but when
I
you,
was born in England. So how could I say no?
how could you? I'm so well. If you're ever over here, we have to get together. We've never shot, but
Okay. All
we'll have to
right.
get
Thank you
together.
so
Oh,
much.
Dr. Nadine, thank you so much.
When you look at me, what